Okay, thank you everyone for participating to Energy in Mind. It's an exciting conference this year, lots of projects worldwide, and we are going to reflect back on this panel discussion on the lesson learned of the projects that have been developed in recent years, and we just heard about 2 projects, and we're going to look also in terms of what are the current challenges for the projects in development. So I would like our panelists to introduce themselves first. Please do so one after the other.
Okay, there we go. I know I took a little too much time, apologize for that. My name is Tom Smith. I'm the head of North American operations for Sterling & Wilson.
My name is Amir Monteblanc. I lead UWI's global business initiatives, of which hybrid is one.
And I'm Clément Faure, and I'm leading the hybrid energy businesses of Total RN, which is a French IPP.
Yes, hi, my name is Magnus Miemois. I'm heading up hybrid solutions for Wärtsilä.
Okay, thank you. Really, really nice to have you on board for this panel. I won't be too tough, even though I look at the previous presentations and clearly there's a lot of difficulties and things that you went through in doing your projects and the projects that you're developing that it's not reflected in those presentations. That looks, I would say, a little bit rosy. But it's amazing that these projects are running and operating and achieving the performances that they're doing. But to get there, you guys worked very, very hard, I know. So we've seen in recent years, like was mentioned before, solar you can find at 4 cents a kilowatt hour easy in regions where it's very sunny, grid connected, and even wind power at 1.6 cents a kilowatt hour. You find that at many different places. I mean, Texas, Oklahoma, Brazil, it's possible. But when you integrate to a mine, there are many, many constraints to take into consideration. And it's in remote locations, so the cost of development and construction is going to be higher. But the process is such that all the energy might not be integratable, and you need to put energy storage. So the levelized cost of energy that you end up with is nothing like the original price you started with for a grid-connected project. Without further ado, I'll ask some questions to our panelists here in terms of the projects that you just mentioned. For Dugressa Mine, maybe you want to say some words about, the operation in terms of issues. You have a PPA, you're integrating the power. Some of the power might be rejected by the operators. It's not always green light, What kind of challenges that you see in terms of day-to-day operation and making sure that you get all your money from the solar power being produced?
Yeah, so looking back at when we started with the Dugressa, like 2013, one of the things that has evolved now is that now you would do a single PPA with one IPP. This project has a double setup. It's a traditional thermal IPP, and then the renewable part is separate, because at that time neither the mine nor the incumbent IPP were keen to take that assets on. So that's something that would structurally make life much easier. And that flows through then to, let's say, minimum generator loading. That's one topic that is of relevance to determine your output of the solar system or how much you have to curtail. Then operational protocols, right? Nowadays, I have someone on my team that was normally sitting on the other side of the table operating the thermal power plant, and you have to make sure that his operational procedure is not compromised by what we do on the renewable side, right? That's one topic, and the key is and remains integration. And it is really different to a grid-connected utility-scale PV or wind project. The loads are different, the electric codes are different, the health and safety requirements are different, and the operational procedures are different. So yes, there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that you don't see on my face today, right? That we had to go through. But luckily, because we had a good bunch of people, the mine, the IPP, even if we sometimes, had to do a bit of a fist fight, in the end we came out and can still have beers together, and the system has improved since we put it in place in the first.
Yeah, very good. So, I mean, you show a lot of determination. I met you last year in Perth, and the year before, you're smiling more than 2 years ago. So, I know all the challenges that they went through. It is a lot of work, so it's not just technical, it's human people, and you need to deal with the operators, and you need to arrive to an agreement. Even if you have a contract, you actually need to manage that contract. There's money on the table on a day-to-day basis, and that's what you're reflecting to. Clément, do you have feedback from the project in Burkina Faso?
Yes, sure. So it's been in operation for close to 8 months now, and I totally stand by what you just said. I mean, in terms of challenges in developing and setting up this project the right way. I mean, obviously, it needs to make sense from an economical standpoint, from the mine management. I mean, it's a decision motivated by obviously a relevance in terms of business. But in the end, if you cannot at the same time get the buy-in of the thermal plant operator, you will never get the benefit that the mine management is expecting to see from the project. And the whole point of it is to try and make them both work at the same time, and outlining the fact that throughout not major disturbance in the way the mine will keep doing things the way it has been doing for 10 years now, on the thermal side, I mean. With minimal disturbance, you can benefit from the whole value of what PV is bringing to thermal.
Okay, that's good. And Magnus, maybe you have watched our engine at Burkina Faso. So what's the impact on the maintenance of the equipment and the resiliency of being able to take those swings, the major swings of solar power?
Yeah, so the first impact is, of course, that you run engines less. And when you run less hours, you have less maintenance. So there's a clear value to the customer from from adding renewables, also on saving on maintenance cost. But it also means that you put the engine, the thermal power plant, will have to also perform more in terms of providing reserves, not only for the thermal plant's operation, but also for the PV plant. So the criticality of features in the engine plant in terms of low ramping, fast starts, etc., is more profound.
Okay, and major ramp rates, you lose 10 megawatt of solar. How fast can the gensets react to compensate for that variability?
Yeah, so in this case, there were no modifications needed to the engine plant. They happen to be of the model and type and make that are quite responsive and have good performance. So you can ramp from within a couple of minutes. You can ramp from minimum load to maximum loading in less than 2 minutes. Okay,
excellent. And Tom, from maybe the construction point of view, how do you see these projects? It's in a remote location. It sometimes requires to utilize or maximize the people already on site. There's lots of civil and concrete that is done in difficult locations. How do you see hybrid and construction in terms of challenge?
Yeah, on the construction side of the world, it's really important. What we've seen is to work with the existing people at the mines. If you're able to use the same contractors that they're using for electrical, civil, mechanical, they have an understanding of the mine and the people, that's critical to what we've seen. And again, we want to supplement that with the best overall people that we have. But even following up too on some of your other points, even though we're not a long-term entry into this market, we've done all the major parts and pieces for a long time. As I mentioned, we're the largest solar guy in the world, one of those. We're very big in batteries, very big in gas engines. So what I think is tremendously important, and probably the most important thing, is you want to find what the overall needs, wants, and desires of the mine are relative to your energy requirements, and you want to match the best technologies. Because if you try to put, a solar system in when it's not a great fit, because of, let's say, inrush situations that the mine has, like on engines, it's very important to match the technologies. So we're equipment agnostic, and we want to put in whatever the best solution is, again, using the contractors that are familiar with the site.
Okay, excellent. One of the major, you didn't mention that part, but we do mines. We see mines where heat requirements is really enormous, almost of the same size as the electrical requirement. So you can have a 10 megawatt electrical site and 10 megawatt thermal site. And so, and we know that we can recuperate about a 1-to-1 for the genset for the energy. And so when you integrate renewable power, whether it's wind and solar, whatever megawatt hour you save on diesel, you lose on thermal, and you need to compensate for it elsewhere. How do you see that? Because that sort of makes the business case tougher, because you need to pay or use natural gas or diesel to compensate for the heat losses.
Yeah, maybe a quick comment there, and I'm sure some of the other people will have ideas. One of the technologies that really hasn't been used that much in mining, where you have the heat, is combined heat and power. So what we've seen in some of the mines that are putting in, let's say, gas engines, where it's easy to capture the waste heat, sort of a combination of an engine where you recover the waste heat, from the exhaust and the coolant, is really important for a great heat balance. And then again, from the electric side, you augment that with the hybrids or the solar, wind, whatever technology is there. But one of the things that you see in mining, like a lot of industries now, is you have to have 100% reliability. So it's really critical that you put the right technologies in place that are going to be available to provide the power when it's needed, and the heat.
Okay, and do you have any comments on that? Because you're running business case on new mines.
None of these cases had a heat recovery or a big heat usage, but we're working on one project in Africa, actually, that is working with the CHP facility, but I couldn't elaborate to the details now of how to balance that loss of heat, basically due to the increased contribution from renewables. So I think I would have to park that. I know we work on one, but no details available from my side now.
Clement, any further comments on that?
No, nothing much. It's in the end, there's no one design fits all. It's going to be each time project specifics, and you know what you win, you know what you lose. If the sum of it works, go for it.
Right. So. Okay. So for me, I do lots of work in the Arctic, as you know, and heat is important. So it does impact the levelized cost of energy you can get. And in Argentina, we're working now on lithium mines, and lithium mines need as much steam as the electrical. So essentially, the levelized cost of solar is doubled just because of that. So you start at 5, 10 becomes the number, 10 cents a kilowatt hour. Just to give an example, where just integrating one single constraint of the mine doubles the price. And the price of natural gas is about 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So you break even right there. Okay, excellent. Just one question for you, Marius, I guess, or maybe you presented it. You mentioned battery with gensets as a business case, and about 4% improvement. What's the levelized cost of charging and discharging the battery?
Yeah, what you try to do, obviously, in charging the battery, if you have renewables on site, you want to try to charge them when your overall cost of power is low. So it really becomes a balancing act.
I'm looking at the case that was mentioned where you have no renewables. You just use the battery to bring the efficiency point of the gensets at 85%, for instance.
Okay. Yeah, and you know what you see now in a lot of mining applications and even in oil and gas industry, you oversize the amount of engines that you need for your capacity. So if you're able to have batteries that can have the engines operate at their best heat rate, you're going to see better overall performance. And then you try to charge those, again, when your demands are low. If you're using diesel, it's not like you're going to get a price break relative to the fuel cost. But again, it just becomes how you charge and when. And it's not too dissimilar from what you even see here in Canada, like with global adjustment, that is being charged for demand. You want to make sure you're charging when it's inexpensive and using it when it's expensive and balancing, you know, your overall heat rate of your overall system.
Okay.
But there is an economic case. I mean, I know one in Australia, in the Northern Territories. Alinta Power runs a gas-fired power station there with 130 megawatt installed capacity. They basically run 2 turbines, and they've put in a significant battery, nothing else. There was no renewable component, and had a payback period within a very short period of time, right? So there is a case. Of course, we think there's even a better financial outcome if you add renewables, but maybe life of mine, contract period restrict that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I echo both both speakers that there is a really strong business case for adding storage to thermal, and the business case is really about providing reserves in a smarter way, and then you take out the hidden cost of a spinning reserve. So it's not so much about where do you charge it, because you're not actually going to cycle it a lot. So that doesn't really bring a lot of impact to the feasibility, but it's actually about replacing other hidden costs.
Yeah, then the other, you know, you asked the question about response time, right? If you have a slower speed diesel, like let's say Wärtsilä makes, or a gas engine, and you have batteries there, you have instantaneous response. So, you know, it is really a balancing act for, you know, your overall reliability of power to when you need it. So, and now with the cost of batteries coming down exponentially, it makes the business case a lot better.
So I would rephrase that maybe in my own words, but when you don't have battery, you need to operate with a certain amount of spinning reserve to keep the grid reliable, and that you do that at a cost of being less efficient, because you'll be running at a lower capacity factor to have like additional spinning reserve. But if you put battery, you can relax that spinning reserve, operate at an optimal point with less spinning reserve, but the battery being there to protect you.
And you can even have a series of different engines too. Like a slower speed engine may not react as quick as like a higher speed rich burn engine, let's say. So you can even have a mixture of engine technologies in a site, correct?
Indeed, bingo.
Okay, so somewhat technical, but actually that's what we're here for. Doing hybrid power projects, it really needs to think outside the box, find the places where you really have benefits, and confront the fact that there are obstacles and challenges.
Maybe I could add a comment related to this, that we believe that there needs to be a very intimate integration between thermal and storage in this kind of solution. Why? Because they form the flexible part of the system.
Mm-hmm.
And by having a very intimate integration between energy storage and thermal engines, then you can achieve the best result. So, and we do it via very tight integration with the energy management system to be able to provide that for, and that gives them a great platform for integrating more renewables. That's how I say it.
Yes, and that just goes into my next question, which is more an open topic on how do you position yourself to provide, develop hybrid power projects how do you develop these opportunities? I mean, you're not coming as I can do solar, I'm the best in solar. How do you position yourself to be credible and make your solution of interest to the mining companies?
We come to your conference.
We offer free wind measurement. So no, joking aside, so I think it's a very, very important question, and the way we look at it now is, as Magnus pointed out, an intimate integration of the thermal and the storage. But I would go one step further. As you've seen, the daily profile of solar is limited in hours, right? In order to shift power and to really cover more than 20-40% of your overall energy needs, a complementary power source that has a 24/7 generation profile, like wind, of course has intermittency, but with a storage component, a very fast and smart integration system, you can go 50 and more percent at a very high reliability and a low cost. So that's what we do. And one of the case studies, we were lucky that we're working with some of the leaders in the mining industry who are willing to not only dip their toe into the water, but stand up to their waist with us and look at something where we integrate a thermal power station that has gas. I think that hasn't been done to a great extent. Diesel engines, HFO engines are more tolerant. Yeah, high-speed diesel engine, I would say, is the most tolerant, according to my understanding. Then you've got HFO, and then you've got gas, reciprocating engines, and somewhere you've got gas turbines. Gas turbines, you better don't have any changes of intermittency, right? So integrating now wind, solar, battery with gas, and this power station in fact has also some additional diesel capacity to provide that additional flexibility and firmness in step load response. I think is how we see going forward towards that vision that the BES now is also taking up 100% renewables. We're hoping to go to like 70 now. That are concrete projects that we see and where we are working on.
Okay.
And one of the great drivers in emerging markets is success, right? And again, we're a relatively new entry into this exact space, but you can see just the projects that I've heard since I've been here and over the time that this conference has been there, there's a lot of success stories, and success breeds success, and then you also see the economics. So the trends of everything that we do, and I think all the panelists would agree, are heading in our favor. So it's just a matter of time before almost every mine looks at their options and they're going to determine what's right for them. But economics and good projects, I think, are going to drive the business.
Maybe another point, I think one is sharing risk with the mines, especially also mines that are not yet operational. Assessing the resource, doing system studies costs all money. And what we do is, since we are a developer as well as a builder of plants, we take that risk. So if the project never gets built, that loss is with us, right? Not with the mine. So I think that helps the industry. And we've been doing that. I'm not saying this is something totally new. We've been doing that in the renewable energy space. We put wind masts up. We do measurements at projects that a couple out of 10 never realize. So that's what we are good at.
Okay, and Clément?
And then just to build up on what has been just said, I mean, to me it's not a bit about time. I mean, time is now. We know that no matter what, PV is cheaper than thermal, than diesel. We know that to the extent to which it gives you a discount depends on whether you are on 10 years, 20 years, 10 megawatts, 70 megawatt. I mean, all of this, but all in, PV is cheaper. And in the end, what's in there for hybrids? It's to provide the more competitive power. That's what PV is for, at no discount with reliability. That's what gensets and batteries are for. And the question is, do we want to do projects which are 70% hybrid, 100% hybrids, 20% hybrids? I think the way I see it is more considering your facilities. Can I stand in your shoes and can I deliver value to your business, which is mining? Can I deliver value on which I can sustain because I have the technical skills, I have the track record, I have the financial capabilities to deliver in time because we are running against clock with the life of mine. And to me, it's just a matter of integrating as much as possible competitive and cheap energy, whether it's wind and solar. Solar in most cases, wind, it's slightly more difficult to integrate, but I mean, we have 1.3 gigawatts of solar and wind asset and window wind as well. The issue is then, do we wait for storage to be competitive enough to displace competitive PV at night? Or do we think that by the time this will come, you will have lose 5 years of life of mine, and what you could gain in terms of fuel displacement, maybe you will have lose it in terms of discount to your current LCOE. So in the end, it's just look at what's there, what's the matrix of the equation, and can I create value?
Okay, very good. One more point?
And one aspect, and it's coming up very clearly in this discussion, that the optimum approach is tailored, because it has to consider that specific location with what is the best natural resource or renewable resource, what are the constraints, is it heating requirement, yes or no. So this requires the sufficient amount of guidance, simulation, evaluation. So of course that's one space where all of us are trying to help our customers find the right way. And what is the steps that can be taken now? Mm-hmm. At the same time, this is all very scalable. So we don't need to wait for, the next update of battery pricing, because we can take one step now and after a few years take next step, because it's very scalable.
Okay, so switching gear to the question that Emmerin, you mentioned, 100% renewable. That's the goal. 2050, that's where the Paris Agreement brings us. No fossil fuel, very little. Many of the bigger mining companies have those objectives, 2030, 2050. How you going to remove coal or natural gas and diesel? It's great thoughts. And we're trying to go toward that. So 2 questions on the 100% renewable, and you mentioned very well the complementarity of wind and solar. But one of the things that is really known about wind is that it can be very windy for a week, and it can be no wind for a week. So it's not a matter of bridging 1 or 2 days. It can really be no wind. And we see months where there's very little wind, and we see months where it's extremely windy. The mine cannot afford to not be operating for a month. So this notion of 100% has to be taken with that thought in mind. So what's your thought? And then that was discussed this morning in the first presentation. How do we make it to 100%, given that in spite of the fact that on the instantaneous basis we know how to handle all the variability of wind and solar right now, there's still the notion that the resource cannot be there at all for longer than you can store energy for it. How do we do that?
I think, Michel, you've worked on it, right? You've worked on the Djavik mine where you generate hydrogen. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? We haven't talked about hydrogen to a great extent. It's sometimes hyped in some years and then it goes down again. Why I'm mentioning hydrogen is not because I think that is a solution, but you need, our approach is minimize the gap of storage that you require, maximize, complement the renewables that you have at your disposal to the maximum, and then it's a techno-economic comparison between chemical storage in the form of batteries and maybe hydrogen. So I work a lot with Australia. There's a big buzz right now for generating renewable hydrogen and becoming an export power to the Asian markets. And I think we'll probably, with economies of scale, see if that can become part of the 100% renewable solution for mines. Yeah.
If you look in a perfect world, like you mentioned, you'd love to get free energy and you'd like to be zero emissions, but it may be something that in an industry like mining, where you need to have 100% reliability, it becomes difficult to get. So I think the ultimate way to get there is just be able to build really inexpensive batteries that can have long lives. But even as you see the advancement in that industry, it's going to be difficult. So like the data center world that we see today, there is some level of backup generation that they may need to have to cover the odd events, let's say, where it's not sunny for a week or it's not windy for a week and you don't have the batteries. So I think to have a goal of perfection is great, but in the real world, you might need to have generation. Then if you could make that generation, like Wärtsilä and other engine guys, is efficient and clean and recover the heat to make it as green and user-friendly as possible, I think that probably is where the ultimate goal will end up, because it's going to be super, super expensive to have 100% renewables and just batteries, would be my guess. And I don't know if I'll be around in 2050, so I may not have to worry much.
My children will be.
Yeah, so we've done a fair amount of modeling.
Good point.
On these kind of, happens to be that our company's energy division is 100% renewable, not only for mining, but in a broader scale. So we've done a fair amount of modeling that what does this mean. But if you transpose it to mining, it means that flexible thermal power capacity would have to be at 100% for those odd days, consecutive days of no wind, no sun, etc. And then the only solution is biofuels. If you want to have that renewable, so you would have to have massive amount of renewable energy, most likely solar, to make hydrogen, make power to gas, power to synthetic fuels. So there is technology, but what is ahead of us is actually a elevated capital expense to achieve that goal.
Okay.
And maybe I would a little bit same way as Tom, that maybe we shouldn't look for perfection. Let's look at what can we do now. We can certainly do 30%.
But again, to your point, the world is going to be around a long time, and I didn't mean to sound like I'm only worried for the years, but it is a great goal to have. It's just, in a practical sense, it's difficult. Not to say you can't do it.
And just to add to what has just been said, maybe also a way to move closer to 100% renewable energy power supply. Obviously, combining renewable energy sources like wind and solar helps narrowing the gap that you need to bridge with storage and energy shifting. Maybe another way would be as well to look what's achievable on the load side. For instance, could there be mining processes, ability to stockpile during night to process most of it during the day and minimize as well this gap between generation and consumption. That also could be a way to move closer to that 100% energy supply.
Absolutely, yeah. To redesign or rethink a little bit of some of the mining process to allow for those downtime would be definitely very helpful. So I'd like just one last question, which is again related to this, is if you're 100% off diesel, at least for some moment, it means you're operating and you're forming the grid on the renewable with batteries or whatever technologies. So what's your take on what's the state of the art right now to do projects where you're actually, at least for some period of time, like Kuberpedi with the Hydro Tasmania controller, where they reach more than 40% of the time, it's 100% off diesel. Where are we and what should we do about that?
Yeah, maybe I can start with the Grasser. The project has 20% displacement, but it has a full diesel off-mode capability. So the microgrid controller that we deployed there has that capability. It's not utilized right now because of constraints on the thermal side, but it has that capability. So the technology is there, and we're working on another project, much smaller right now, where we have a renewable energy share of 70 to 80%. It's much smaller, right? More experimental, I would say. That's where we are right now.
Well, I think one of the things we haven't talked a lot about, and I know our company is spending a lot of dollars on, and you touched on it, is developing the optimum controller, and then to have confidence in the technologies that you have. So if you can have a controller that's going to optimize which technology is used and when, and you have a very, very reliable battery, let's say wind and solar system, it's definitely doable. But again, you have to have confidence in the technologies and the controllers you mentioned.
Yeah, so the same here, the capability, the technical capability is there. Still right now we recommend to keep inertia, spinning inertia in a mining system. Depends on the size of the loads. What are the load block sizes? But what we've seen so far is that we would recommend still a synchronous generator base load. Although the other, so the storage can actually act as a virtual synchronous generator.
Okay.
Please join me in thanking this panel.